Hello and welcome to CodeCast by STLTechTalk. My name is Kevin Harvell and I will be sitting in for our regular host, JJ Hammond. JJ is off receiving some honors awards from UMSL tonight as he prepares for graduation with his bachelor's degree in computer science. But we still have the normal co-host, Gus Emery from Minnesota. How are you tonight, Gus?
Doing well, Kevin. Thanks for sitting in for JJ. It's going to be an interesting night up here. Hopefully we don't have too much thunder before the show's over.
Oh, yeah. I completely understand that. We did that a few weeks ago ourselves. And our guest for tonight is a web developer, Git enthusiast, language geek, and four-time C# MVP from Grand Rapids, Iowa. By day, he sells motorcycle parts at JMP Cycles. By night, he sometimes blogs with Lost Techies. His open source efforts include Posh Git, a Git environment for PowerShell, and UpForGrabs.net, a site featuring open source projects looking to mentor new contributors. He's also a core contributor to libgit2sharp, used by GitHub for Windows and Git for Visual Studios. Keith has spoken at community events around the Midwest and studied human-computer interaction at Iowa State University. His talks have been described as terrific, very interactive, and the best I've seen all hour. Say hello, Keith Dahlby.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for joining us. And if you want to hear previous episodes of CodeCast, make sure to do a search for CodeCast on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn Radio, or your preferred podcast app of choice. And if you could do us all a favor, tell anyone you know that may be interested in developing or coding to check this show out, and if you have any suggestions for future guests and or topics, you can email us at podcast@stltechtalk.com. And with all that said, let's get on with the show. Gus?
Sure. Keith, thanks for joining us tonight. It's always fun talking to you and talking about certain things that you've been doing. So why don't you tell us what gets you involved in technology? I mean, what drives you every day?
What drives me every day? I guess I just like solving problems. It started at a young age. My dad taught computer science, and brought home a book and said, "Teach me HTML." I never did, but I learned it myself. And I guess that's just kind of continued on, and I don't know. It's just fun building something out of nothing. It's the Lego analogy, but you don't actually have to go buy bricks. You just type some words into a computer and magic happens. It's a pretty neat experience. And we're fortunate that we can have our career also be our hobby, or our hobby our career, whichever way you want to look at it.
No, I totally understand. I have one other question too, and it comes from your bio. Can you describe what human-computer interaction is and what you learned in college on that topic? Because that actually interests me.
Yeah, so for undergrad I did computer engineering, computer science, but after I graduated, it was actually my wife that who also studied computer engineering, that she started doing a certificate program at Iowa State in human-computer interaction. And so the focus of that sort of a program is really on the kind of the boundaries between technology and their human users. So conversations about usability, conversations about psychology of psychology of your user base, and things like affordances and interfaces that just are natural to use. Which is interesting because you throw even an iPhone, you throw that in front of a certain kind of user and they're just kind of confused. They don't quite understand it. You have to have a certain level of experience with various technologies. And so we talked about computer vision, parsing images, reading text out of images, signal processing, the similar sort of thing. We talked about about usability and user studies and personas and all that kind of thing. It was a very, very interesting set of kind of applied computation classes. That was a lot of fun.
Cool. Yeah, one of the reasons why I ask that is because a lot of people that sit down and use computer programs, or, as you said, iPhones, Androids, Windows phones, whatever, don't actually think about that whole computer-human interaction piece, right? They just think about, hey, it's something that gets it done, and a lot of the developers and creators that I know don't actually think about that. They think about, well, let's throw these things on the screen and see how they work, right? And test it in front of people instead of thinking exactly how would something be used if they see it and whatnot. And I think there's a specialty there that really needs to be kind of tackled more than I think it is today.
Yeah, and we've tended to, as kind of a web professionals, we've tended to sort of, we'll take some folks that know Photoshop and label them as web designers, but especially as we've kind of emerged in this whole responsive design and adaptive sort of, the experience really needs to depend on the device and the environment that the user's working in. You might have a high resolution screen that's the size of an iPhone because hello Retina, so everything just kind of changes, and if you don't have kind of that user-focused mindset, you're going to struggle when there are so many companies that do focus on that kind of thing.
Yep. So here's a good technology question for you that comes from what a lot of people ask me. So I kind of like to return that to everybody else. But one, how do you track new technology? I mean, how do you find out about it? And secondly, is there a special place that people can look to actually find out about new things coming out without having to search them out?
Yeah, I'm still kind of old school. There are a handful of blogs that I still, kind of keep an eye on to get news. And really, I still depend a lot on Twitter. I'm not on there all the time, but whenever I am, it's following, from a design standpoint, it's following the RWD Twitter handle, sharing links about people rolling out new designs and people doing studies about various user experience elements. Twitter has been invaluable for that kind of thing, especially because it's so easy to follow a diverse set of people that might be sharing links, from the Ruby community, from the Python community, from the JavaScript community, that are, even if I wouldn't necessarily read one of those blogs every single post that comes out, it's still, highlighting the kinds of things that are, valuable. So I do a lot of that, and from there it's just, kind of word of mouth, hearing from friends, oh, hey, have you heard about this interesting thing, that interesting thing, getting to conferences. It's mostly my peers, I guess.
Gotcha. So one thing that I always like to evangelize is the fact of getting out there into the community and learning, right? Or at least being seen and networking. You would totally agree with that then?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there was from a career standpoint, there was a marked shift in my, career path as a professional when I discovered a local user group and realized that, hey, there are other people like me that aren't just, programmers by day, but that are actually, really engaged in this kind of stuff. And, I went to a couple of user groups and I went to all the user groups and then, hey, why don't you come and speak on this? And, and here we are several years later that I've, given, dozens, probably 100 presentations by now. Which is just kind of ridiculous to think about, but it's it's a great way to connect with people and to kind of give back from all the I've learned a lot from various various presenters over the years, so trying to kind of reciprocate and educate the next generation of people that might do the same.
So a couple things to touch on what we've just talked about with that human computer interaction. Do you think there's a kind of a disconnect between your average consumer and the developer to make sure that maybe there needs to be a better relationship, because consumers kind of know what they're looking for out of their applications and software, and developers have an idea of what they definitely want, but it might not necessarily be exactly what the consumers want.
Oh yeah, that's so I mean, this is especially apparent working in e-commerce. There are all sorts of kind of metrics based, or I guess a whole bunch of techniques to really find out what your customers are thinking. We'll do recorded user studies. There are companies like usertesting.com that'll have an app that'll actually record people using your site. So you can track their eye movements and track their cursor, and they'll talk themselves through the process, checking out while buying a new tire for their motorcycle. And so having gone through those sorts of experiments and doing a lot of A/B testing, we'll routinely put out a change that we think is positive, only for the data to come back and say, well, in fact, it's not. It's a classic one is the majority of e-commerce sites have kind of a grid type layout. Have a handful of pictures in rows that are kind of laid out as grid, a little photo and a title and a price, and that's kind of it. Well, J&P has always had a list kind of view that has a picture and then some specs and details and pricing and then an add to cart button. And everybody thought, well, let's just switch to a grid because that's what everybody else does. So we tested it, and it lost handily. Everybody was thinking, well, we need to do this. It's what our competitors do. Well, I mean, hopefully the competitors aren't listening now, or they might change. But we were all just really surprised by those results, because it turns out that what customers are looking for when they're buying parts is different than what we had assumed customers are looking for in general when they're shopping online, which might be more visual, but parts aren't a visual thing. It's a, does this fit my bike? Does this have the right specifications? So I mean, we're routinely surprised by the influence of a particular color of button. Apparently green is the better call to action, but only in certain places.
Right.
And it's just that sort of stuff just kind of blows the mind, and the consumer will never be able to articulate it. You say, tell me what you want, and they'll be completely off base. But you take that and you try and distill it down into what are they really asking for. It's no different when the business the business says, we want you to do X and this is how you should do it. Well, you always have to step back and say, all right, what's the problem you're actually trying to solve?
Right.
And then you hopefully end up in the right place.
Right.
And hopefully that problem that they're trying to solve, they actually can articulate. Sometimes they can't, and that's where you even get into worse trouble. But you solve it sooner or later.
Yeah. Sometimes they don't even know what they want. So.
Yeah, well, exactly. So, quick question for you: since a lot of your history is with Git, why Git?
Why Git? Well, I'd be lying if a large chunk of it initially didn't have to do with GitHub. GitHub was just such a different experience for sharing code and kind of doing the whole open source thing. And it's evolved a long way since then. But the biggest thing for me, I guess, the thing that took me from somebody who uses it only for dabbling in open source stuff here and there is when I started using it day to day at work. I was actually using it in the context of a Subversion repository. So I started using Git SVN, and I just kind of hacking around, and ultimately find a nice workflow that worked for me. But the biggest thing is just, when we were working in Subversion, we tended to avoid the whole branching and merging thing because merging was just kind of so painful. The longer running the branch was, the more difficulty you had merging it back in, and weird directory sort of conflicts. Not that we ever spent a whole lot of time trying to get better at it, but once I started using Git locally, it was just so easy for me to just pivot on a dime and say, all right, so I'm working on this, and then the boss comes and says, here's an emergency. All right, pause what I'm working on, switch context completely, solve that problem, save the day, and then switch back to that other branch and end up right back where I was. Even if I had spent that time to try and get back to the point where, I guess, get up to the point where I could use Subversion that effectively. It's all, talking to the server, it's all, relatively slow compared with Git, where it's just, lightning fast, updates in place. It's just, it really changed the way that I work. Not that, Mercurial, nowadays can support the same kinds of workflows, but, I learned it with Git. I'm most comfortable with Git. And I don't know, I'm just looking forward to the next year or two, when we actually start to get a real Git experience on Windows, because it's still just, Git on Bash on Windows, and that just doesn't feel quite right.
Yeah, I did see Martin Woodward do an interesting demo at Build this year on Git and explaining, how actually Git works behind the scenes, which was even better for me because the first time I used it, I was at a client and we decided to try it, and it actually, the light bulbs went off in my head, right? Went, wow, this is really cool. I can do this, and then I can branch off and fix a bug and merge it back in and check that in by itself and roll things back and do this and do that, all on my local workstation, and it's very easy, and I don't have to deal with branching on the server, right? The downfall, however, was that it, as you said, it's Bash in DOS, dealing with macros, connected to TFS, right? Yep. At least that's what mine was.
Yeah, it's a very, Git's made, there's some C components of Git, but there are some Bash scripts. Git SVN I think is still implemented in Perl. Yep. It's just, it's kind of it's very much the product of a bunch of Linux hackers, for better or for worse. I'm able to get everything I need to get done with it, but I definitely had reservations as I started evangelizing Git to the rest of my team. I evangelized it not from the standpoint of you have to use Git, but hey, look what I can do.
Yes.
Look at me switching contexts here, here, and here. Look at me being able to structure my thoughts, from one commit to the other. It's fundamentally changed the way that I worked, and as I was able to, kind of share that with the rest of the team and get them working like me, defects went down, time to ship went down. It was a very good experience, but I just had some pretty severe reservations. This was a couple of years ago now about, there's a designer that works with me who's very much the click on the edit menu and then go copy. Not even right-click copy, edit menu copy. For a clicker, how do you convert that sort of a person to embrace Git when we'd been using Tortoise SVN? And ultimately now she's my biggest advocate, just because it's changed the way that she's able to work and try experiments, and that didn't work, roll back.
Yep. I think to coin a phrase from a good friend of mine, Don Felker, after working like a week and a half, and we were both at the same client at the same time, he said working with Git for Git TF for, I think it was Git TF back then, right?
TFS was first, but anyway.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Well, whichever one it was, Git TFS, Git TF, made me a better developer, right? Because it allowed him to think outside of the normal bounds and actually allowed him, as you said, to functionally pay attention to what he was doing.
Yeah, so Tim Barch is the guy that got me to come work with him at J&P, and he and I have had some really interesting conversations because I'm a well documented Git enthusiast, and Tim's always been more of the it's just source control as long as it saves the source, we're cool, and I just can't. I don't know. I don't think it's that simple. I think it's. And it may just be because I've embraced it as part of my workflow, but I think there really is an element of, committing often and structuring, thinking about how you're committing. You say, all right, well, is this part of the change, or do I need to commit and move on to the next part of the change? Looking through history where I can say, all right, well, this line last changed with this tiny, tiny commit that just says it's refactoring. Well, it says it's refactoring, but this is a bug. So now I know that this isn't intentional. This wasn't a deliberate sort of feature kind of thing. This is a regression because they said we're refactoring, but we're not. So that sort of stuff. It's just I don't know. I don't work in code bases anymore that haven't been in Git for several years, but I have colleagues that are working in some repositories that have not had that sort of discipline. And it's just kind of night and day the value that we get out of the history and the kind of agility and nimbleness within that code base.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. The only thing that I'd like to throw out there is that dealing with lots of developers, like hundreds of them, some people just will never figure it out. It's better that they just do the normal everyday source code. Save your source code. It's saved. It's stored. We have history. We're good to go. Yep. And then there are other people that will just completely embrace Git, or something like it anyway. Right? Better source control. We'll put it that way.
Yep.
Source control squared.
Yeah, and it's if it's not your thing, that's fine. I'm not sure I'd want to work with you though. There's definitely value in working with professionals that'll embrace anything that can make them just a little bit more effective. There are a few tools in my toolbox that I would value up there with Git.
That's huge. So we were talking, or in your thing, you were talking about upforgrabs.net. So why don't you describe that a little bit? And I think you've got a few little things to show us too, don't you?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and show that off.
Okay.
Share my screen.
While you're doing that, we'll mute out, and if we have any questions, we'll pop back in just so that your screen stays on.
Yeah, you bet. All right, you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. All right. Well, so this is Up for Grabs. Up for Grabs started in out of a conversation back at the MVP Summit in November, talking with some of the ASP.NET MVPs about open source and kind of its role. Actually, I don't think it was even ASP.NET. I think it was just kind of really any developers kind of interested in open source type stuff. And the comment was that a lot of developers don't know really kind of how to get started. And since .NET is kind of just getting around to this whole open source thing, certainly there's a subset of the community that's been doing open source for many years. But for the mainstream, there's a lot of fear around ASP.NET's open source now. What's going on? This whole Owen thing. That's a community standard. This is is Microsoft. What's Microsoft doing there? And so out of that. I think it was Hanselman, came over. He was like, so you should go, make a site for that. Go register that domain. Talking about projects that are inviting people to sort of use them as the starting point to really understand and start contributing to open source. So I checked a couple domain names. Up for Grabs .net. That's up for grabs with dashes. Up for Grabs. So the domain was free. Went ahead and registered, and probably about hour later, I'd set up a GitHub pages connected to the custom domain, and off we went. It was initially just a static HTML with a handful of projects that I knew had kind of a tag to identify the projects that they were looking to. Identifying the issues that they wanted help with, and since then it's expanded to quite a few. I think Bow here is our newest entry. Bow being a C# build script environment using Roslyn and script CS. But yeah, so it's ultimately there's a lot yet that can be done with it to actually put a bit more. Hey, welcome, and this is how you do kind of get started. But the killer feature at this point is this list of projects, and so I can come in here, I can type in tabs and say, all right, hey, well, we've got there are 6 projects tagged with ASP.NET, and so of these, there's Glimpse by Nick and Anthony, some great stuff there. Oak, RESTful routing, a lot of just a diverse set of projects, and so each of them now identify a tag that typically will link out to GitHub or Codeplex. So if I come here and look at the jump in tag on Glimpse, we'll see that there are 15 open issues saying, hey, this is something where we'd like to encourage a new contributor to jump in. So need information on a README. So that would invite someone to say, all right, well, I've been using Glimpse for a while. I don't really feel like contributing code, but I could hop in and say, hey, this is how you get up and started with Glimpse. Owen Katana support. So really these are, out of, let's see, how many issues do they have overall? So they have 90 issues. So they're not just tagging everything as, hey, we'd love your help. No, this is a specific set of issues that have been identified as simple enough to provide a jumping in point. Maybe it's a simple bug, maybe it's a nice to have, something like keyboard shortcuts. It's not really a killer feature, but if someone, more client-side inclined wanted to jump in and say, hey, I'm gonna, add some key bindings here and whatnot. That's kind of the spirit of Up for Grabs. It's really not meant to be a, hey, just come and dogpile your project in here for some extra SEO love, but we're really looking for people who have who are really looking to kind of help some folks get started. One of the things that's really impressed me is how many, so if you look at tags kind of by frequency here, .NET is 28, next highest is F# at 14. So the F# community has really kind of embraced this as a way to advertise their projects as wanting to encourage other people. So we've got the F# binding that's used for mono-developed Xamarin Studio. We've got F#.data, which has some type providers that are fantastic. Fake, the amazing cross-platform. It's the best the only reasonable cross-platform build for .NET. So the F# community is really kind of hopped in here to kind of flush this out. Even the visual F# tools are on up for grabs with some issue. I'm kind of curious what issues they've got in here.
Yeah. So, quick question for you: How do you add your site to up for grabs?
How do you add your site? Well, in true open source fashion, you send me a pull request. So when I started this, it was just a GitHub Pages kind of thing as an easy way to just, as a static HTML table. Eventually, we added some filtering, kind of a JavaScript reordering. You'll notice if I'll flip back here just for a second. If I refresh this page, we're going to get the items in a different order. So we're randomizing this, so it's not always whoever got in first, competing for the top spot. We randomize that list as really just, this is a diverse set of projects. So those are all things that have been supplemented, largely not by me, largely things from the community. But one of the contributions from the community has transitioned that database out of just HTML kind of flat files into a feature of Jekyll, which is what GitHub Pages uses behind the scenes, that it'll read in a YAML file for you as a database of sorts. And so this is what the database for up for grabs looks like. And so it's just a very simple YAML configuration type file, key value pairs, the name is tika.net, Freitas, Glimpse, descriptions, link to the site, tags. So we take all of these things. You'll notice here 33 contributors. So this is 33 different people that have opened a pull request and said, hey, I'd like to contribute my project. I'd like to put myself up here. I don't know, there's just something poetic to me about using GitHub and using pull requests to contribute to a project that's trying to encourage people to contribute to projects, which I think is pretty neat.
Yeah, so for those users or listeners that we have, what is a pull request? Exactly how would you do that for those of them that haven't done that before?
What is a pull request? That is a great question. So I'm on GitHub here, and GitHub is They say that GitHub is about social coding, and kind of its killer feature is this notion that I can come, pick a random project. I could pick a project via up for grabs, for example. I can fork that repository, which basically says I'm going to give myself an extra copy of this, give myself a sandbox copy of this repository that I can kind of play around in, that I can eventually actually make changes and then contribute those back. And so just for giggles, let's come in here and I'll go ahead and fork this to a demo organization that I have. So now this is a separate version of up for grabs. So if I come back here, you'll notice that the commit list is changing here. 183 commits here, 62 commits there. So I guess this is actually an old version of my up for grabs fork. And so what I'm able to do is go ahead and I could check that, I could clone this on my local machine with Git if I wanted to, or I can actually come in here and just make a change. Here, let's pick a file to edit. Let's grab the README, run open source project, submit a pull request. We're just going to add a new line there for no particular reason. We can give ourselves a commit message, update the README, whatever. So I'll go ahead and commit those changes. So now I've just edited that file. If I look at history, we can see here's the May 7th, updated the README, added a link to the website, etc. So now that I have this change, what I can do is actually come here and open a pull request. So this is a pull request from my demo version of up for grabs to the Dahlby K version, which is the main version that's linked up to the public website. So if I come in here, I say create pull request, that's going to give me an opportunity now to say these are some changes that I want to contribute to the up for grabs project. And so the changes that we make here, one of these is that change that we just made in the README. The other is a change that's been stuck out here for related to the whole GitHub Pages thing. But ultimately, this is going to show up for me in the Dahlby K Up for Grabs project under its pull requests. And so if I look at some of the old pull requests, you'll see that each one of these is a person. So Chris Missel used to work with me before he abandoned me to Austin. And so, so this is a pull request kind of in action. So he comes in, he gave his title as add automapper. He didn't just provide a description. I would have expected something witty, but I guess he was off his game. And then ShiftKey, who actually works, Brendan Forster, who works at GitHub, actually, went ahead and said thanks, and went ahead and merged this pull request. So with this pull request, we have associated commits. Here's that commit that Chris made in April. These are all the changes that he made. So this is a code review mechanism that's part of GitHub. I can come in here and I can comment on lines. I can say Jimmy Bogard is my hero. I hope that's actually Jimmy. Yeah, it's Jimmy. So he's going to get tagged there. So that'll be fun. Anywho, so I can come in here, I can do code review. Jimmy can come back and say, no, you are my hero, and it'll be all sorts of sentimental. And ultimately then, we'll go back and forth, might need to push additional changes, edit the file, hey, you forgot a closing tag here or something, who knows. And then when we're happy with the result of that pull request, then we can come in and actually merge the change. This has already been merged, a couple weeks ago, but that's kind of the gist of it. Really, it's just a way to say, hey, person that I've possibly never even met, here's some changes that I made to your project. I'm requesting that you pull those in. Pull being a git command that basically says take a change from over here and pull it in over here. So I guess that's kind of the gist of a pull request, and that's how all of Up for Grabs got its projects.
See, and in the normal development cycle in source controller, right, a pull would be give me what you have, right, and then I'd push it back up, whereas Git kind of inverts that, right?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, so for somebody like myself who's a complete, novice with like zero experience with coding and developing at all, what would you recommend to people that are kind of interested in getting started with developing and coding? Was there a particular language that you would kind of recommend, or would like your website here, Up for Grabs, would that be something somebody could go to and say, okay, well, there's some things here I can look at and kind of help get their feet wet?
Yeah, I mean, in development in general, I think there are lots and lots of resources these days for just kind of dipping your feet in. There's some kind of tools and frameworks targeted for younger people learning to code. Things like Scratch and Alice, and then for for older folks that are maybe not looking for tools that seem like they're targeted for kids, there are things like Code Academy where you can come and just have sort of browser driven experiments in Python and Ruby and JavaScript. I mean, JavaScript is a terrible language to start with, except for the fact that it runs everywhere, which makes it a great language to learn with. You just have to ignore the parts that suck. But yeah, I mean, it's a great time to. It's a great time to learn. Well, I mean, it's a great time to be a developer, and it's an equally great time to learn how to write some code. But I mean, ultimately, you just it really doesn't matter what language you pick. I'm even talking with my dad, who taught computer science back in the BASIC and Pascal days. Then he went into administration and doesn't really write code anymore. He says, well, if I wanted to get back into it, what should I do? I don't know, pick a language and start. There are certainly languages that I would not advocate starting with. C would be high on that list. But it's dynamic languages are easy to run with Ruby and Python. JavaScript is JavaScript. But even environments like go download Visual Studio Express, and you can get yourself up and running pretty quickly with not a whole lot of ceremony.
Okay, so and like with Pluralsight and sites like that, or just going to YouTube and and just watching videos, you feel it would be a good resource. Just people just watch video and kind of play around and just.
Yeah, I mean, and especially when you don't, when you're just starting out, you don't know the kinds of, there are various development atrocities that are committed every single day, but when you're just starting out, none of those things matter. So I mean, heck, go pick up PHP. Get a $2 host and throw a little, echo PHP info or whatever that little script is, and hey, I've got I'm a web developer now. I don't know. There's no bad way to get started. If I'm going to pay you, then I've certainly got some expectations.
Right.
Isn't that the truth?
Well, not everywhere.
Yeah. Well, and for me, Kevin, just so that I can answer that one too, is there isn't really a language, but this show is a great start. I mean, you're learning a lot about development on this show. Hint, hint. Shameless plug. But nonetheless, that's one of the great things about the internet is you can go out and learn just about anything that you wanted. There's tons of sites out there. There's tons of documentaries, and as Keith said, there are some atrocities, but when you're learning, it doesn't matter. You're still learning. And that's the bonus, is I think that one of the best parts of this career, and Keith, you and I were talking about this before the show, is not only do we get to do what our hobby is for a job, which is unbelievable, but I enjoy learning, and I'm continuously learning in this job. So if I like something like that, it's great to do it as a career. I've got to say that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there are days that there's an article floating around, I think last week maybe, why programming sucks. And and the gist is, someone says, oh, I go to my day job and I have to lift 50-pound bags of concrete around. You just have to sit at your desk and type all day. Well, yes, I have to type all day, but when I say atrocities, there are severe atrocities that are most of them not life-threatening, but I mean, it's the kind of stuff that I mean, it's a miracle that any of it works. It really is, because a lot of us are just kind of figuring this out as we go along.
Yeah, not only have I seen it, but I've probably done it. I'll take blame for it.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you don't look at code you wrote 2 years ago and say I was an idiot, you're not learning fast enough.
Yeah, I had a piece of code that I just looked at and rewrote that had, I think, every function in it had at least 2 memory leaks. Now, mind you, I did not write this one, but just to look at it and go, wow, that was pretty bad, was one of those crazy thoughts that how did this not crash 60 times a month, right? But then I realized that the code isn't called that often, so therefore, IIS cleared its app pool and recycled and took care of it, so you probably wouldn't have noticed it. However, if we had 5 times the traffic to this specific piece, it probably would have crashed weekly. Right? So those are those things where it's kind of scary.
And that kind of reminds me of the Apple iOS security hole that apparently had been in there for years, and it was just basically just one line of the code.
Go to fail.
They kind of like canceled everything below it out. To a point.
Yeah, and there's certainly, I said, languages to start with, not C. There are certainly languages that are easier to mess up than others. There are a lot of really, really poor C programs where the language will just keep on trucking. And so which is one of the reasons that I prefer and a lot of the dynamic languages are the same way. It's really easy to just overlook this one small typo. Oh, hey, this language is case sensitive, and this one place I had an uppercase instead of a lowercase. That's one of the reasons that I prefer I prefer using a strongly typed and statically typed language like C# or F#, because it's the languages go out of their way to prevent you from falling into some really easy pits like that that bug in iOS.
I totally agree with you on that, 100%. For me, if I was to say kick off and start programming now, I'd probably look at one of the offshoots, that kind of designs and builds like Light Switch or Web Matrix, and just create something that's button clicks and whatnot, and then go back and see the code that it built.
Mm-hmm.
That would be one way that I would teach myself how to code today, anyway. Not like back in the day where you're looking through every magazine and book that you can find just to learn how to do certain things because it's not documented and there was no internet.
Yeah. Oh, I found a stack of magazines from 2001, and it just kind of blew my mind, the sort of stuff that they were talking about. It was.
Was it Visual Studio magazine from back in the day?
I think there was one. There were a couple Dr. Dobbs.
Oh yeah.
Journal. This brave new world of ASP.NET.
Oh yeah, that would have been 2001. I remember that real well. The VB6 world before that was even scarier, believe me.
Oh, we've still got some classic ASP that I get to play with every now and again.
Oh, that's always fun. Is there anything else you wanted to show, Keith?
Anything else I wanted to show?
Yeah, since we kind of sidetracked you from the up for grabs.
I don't know. I guess we could look at the, so the entire up for grabs site is really just this one page. So this is using a template actually that GitHub provided. When you generate a GitHub pages, they offer you a handful of templates, for you to use. It's automatically responsive. So if I go to upforgrabs.net, so I can now resize my page, and it's all just kind of happy and stuff. So I guess if we go back to GitHub, we can hop in here and actually look at the kind of DSL that we're using to extract the information out of that data YAML file. So here we've just got some content and content and content. So this is where our projects show up. And then down at the bottom we have some how to get yourself on this here list. And then we hit our script where we actually go to build the little table that everybody sees. And so the first thing we do here is we're using a script tag with a type that isn't text JavaScript. Now when browsers hit a script that's a type they don't recognize, they just ignore it. But the element still exists on the page. So what we can do is grab that template by ID. And so that is what we do down. Where do we pull that in? Oh, it's in a different file. That's cute. So we'll go find that JavaScript later. But we grab that template, and then in the template here we've got just kind of some standard sort of markup, and then we have these little alligator tags that are basically doing a for each over this list of tags in the project. And so we're enumerating over the list of tags, and for each of them we're saying, let's build a build a little select drop down here, output an option with an entry and the name and the frequency, and then we're going to build a for each over each of the projects, and spit out a table with each of those elements, just kind of chopping it up. So this is a little DSL. I don't know if this is actually underscore or just something underscore JS, or if it's something kind of related to it. But ultimately, we just have this really simple sort of template, and then in our JavaScript, we go ahead and pull that into the the actual DOM of the page, and what you see is then the result of that, the result of parsing this template and processing the data. And then finally here, site.data is how we get to stuff in that data YAML directory, and projects is the name of that file. And so we take that data and JSONify it, turn it into a JSON value that we output into just a normal JavaScript object, and then we're able to use that JavaScript object from our scripts. So if we look over here in our JavaScripts, so in main, this is our kind of project service. We go, I don't know, somebody else wrote all of this code. I really haven't looked at it all that closely in quite a while, but ultimately this is all of the navigation that does the navigation by tags. You get permalinks from tabs. This is where we go grab that HTML template element. So we just go grab it by ID with jQuery, and then grab the HTML, and ta-da, that's the template that we're going to use to render all of these elements. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm impressed how far we've gotten without the need for any sort of a server. There's no application code. There's no code really to speak of, other than just processing this template and some client-side stuff.
Yeah, that's actually pretty cool.
Yeah,
just
impressive.
I mean, just pretty streamlined with everything, and I'm sure it probably runs pretty smooth.
Yeah, it's and if we were to go, it would be neat if somebody, I really should have tried to queue up somebody to open a pull request for me while I was here, and then we could have gone through and kind of processed through it. But I don't know. The best part about it is that I have done very little of this, other than just kind of trying to nudge the conversation along and encourage people to contribute their projects. The tag filtering was, hey, we should add tag filtering, and then somebody contributed it. It's pretty much all of it is hey, wouldn't it be nice if we could have permalinks? Yeah, all right, and somebody contributed.
That's even better, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't want to work on it, but if other people can, then that's really kind of setting the tone for the kind of site that we want it to be.
Yeah, well, and unlike Days of Future Past, right? I have to throw out that JJ shot there for his Marvel collection, but anyway, not to Days of Future Past, but when people used to be experts in a lot, today, I would much rather harness 50 people that are experts in 50 different aspects than have to learn them myself. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
And it gets it done much faster because somebody's probably already done it, and they can just create their quick little, open source piece, hook it into yours, and off you go. And then they get more too.
Yeah, there's from a business standpoint, it's just there are things that we're good at, there are things that we focus on. Then there are things that just aren't our, they're not our primary bit of it's we're an e-commerce shop. We're not a ORM development shop. So why would we roll our own ORM in-house when we could just use the project, use the fruits of the labor of somebody who is, for whatever reason, passionate about data access or about Git, or I dabble in libgit2sharp on the side because I have this absurd sort of fixation on Git as the wave of the future. I certainly don't expect everybody's going to I certainly don't expect everybody, oh, you should learn Git by diving into a library trying to re-implement it. No, that's just insane. But because I have this psychosis, then millions of people around the world are able to benefit from the fruits of that labor, using Git in Visual Studio, using Git through GitHub for Windows, and it's pretty cool to see and to participate in.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. In fact, I brought it up on one of my monitors here, and it came up very quick. I mean, very, very fast site. It works really well.
Well, it's just static. And,
yeah, I know, that's the point.
Just for the record, libgit2sharp also up for grabs.
Uh-huh.
So you should come and help us.
I may just do that.
Well, I mean, not you specifically, but
no.
The collective you.
Yes. Look at that. Pretty cool. Easy fix. Look at that.
Yep.
Super easy fix.
Yeah, nothing's easy. But yeah, I mean, there's a guy that just showed up recently on libgit2sharp. I don't know if he found us via up for grabs. I really have no idea where he came from, but he was just like, oh, I'm just going to start picking off these one by one by one. And so we've had a whole bunch of open pull requests from him, and it's been I don't know. I've so null token Emmerich is a guy from, I think, Paris. And he's just been a fantastic mentor for people trying to, I mean, when I got libgit2sharp was the first project of somebody else's that I really contributed to in any significant amount, And he was so gracious in helping me, learn the GitHub ropes of how to send a good pull request and how to, I messed something up, how can I fix it? And so really those are the kinds of things that we're looking for on Up for Grabs. Is we're looking for projects that want to help somebody that says, I'm sorry guys, I screwed this up, can you help me fix it? And so we'll walk them through how to fix it and how to get to the point where we're able to close this out and merge the chain and say, great job, thanks a lot.
Mm-hmm.
What's next?
Yeah, that's that was the whole basis that Linus Torvalds started with, right? With Linux, right? I can't finish it all. Let's collectively do it.
That is true.
Which is a great idea. Well, so, you've shown us a ton. I mean, that's perfect in the open source world, because open source is becoming more and more the forefront of what I'm hearing from everybody. We've got Microsoft open sourcing everything, including the Roslyn compiler. We've got other companies doing tons of open source. We have people collectively coming out and making up this matrix of open source products that a lot of people are using, right? Most major companies have at least a significant percentage of their code coming from open source, whether they know it or not. I'm going to say that because, well, and especially if you look in the .NET world, right? Excuse me. Everything that is coming out now is coming through NuGet, and most of what is in NuGet is actual open source software. Not all of it is, but most of it is.
Yep.
And that being said, I think open source is probably going to be one of the things that we see, even getting bigger and bigger than it has been in the past couple of years.
I hope so.
Yeah, I do too. I fully appreciate it and totally agree with it. The only downfall I see to it is are people going to actually be looking for security holes or backdoors or other things on certain things? And I think that we need to be a little diligent in corporate America utilizing it, not saying that we shouldn't do it, but that we should just do our checks and balances and validate it.
Yeah, well,
in my opinion.
Well, and it's interesting because on one hand, it was all right. Do we have are there people looking for security holes and whatnot in the open source stuff? Well, it's easier to look for security holes there than it is in proprietary stuff because you don't have access to the source.
Yep.
On one hand, someone who's trying to compromise you can go look at that source. On the other hand, you can too. So as long as you're better than your attackers, more proactive than your attackers, as long as you're in a pool of people using this particular, application, this particular, open source project. I don't know. I mean, ultimately, I think we're, and I'm sure there are statistics that would pit proprietary against open source. Bugs happen. There's still far too much code written in C, and bugs are just far too easy to write in C. Whether it's buffer overflows or goto fails. Eventually it'd be neat if we could get core infrastructure to run off of languages that actually have any sort of assurances that you're not doing something idiotic. But until we get to that point.
Yep. We're a little stuck. So here's a question for you, Keith. What do you do away from the keyboard? All I've heard you talk about tonight is programming and programming and programming. Do you do anything away from the keyboard? Do you have any other hobby?
Sometimes I watch TV while I'm coding. No, that's not entirely true. All the time that I have a daughter that's almost 3. We have baby number 2 on the way shortly. So I spend a lot of time with my family, and I enjoy that quite thoroughly. And when we're not doing the family thing, I let's see, my wife and I, before we had kids, we went ballroom dancing quite a bit. Picked that up in college and competed for a while. I think we placed 3rd in the collegiate, national championship. Out of a field of 20, but still, it was, they called it the championship, so I'll take it.
That's pretty impressive for me.
Yeah, you could have done Dancing with the Stars, man.
I have danced with one of the professionals on Dancing with the Stars.
Have you really?
Yeah, his name is Jonathan Roberts, and it was a very special time in my life.
Huh. Yeah,
he doesn't follow very well, though, I've got to say.
Oh, all I can say is that you've got me beat because I have absolutely no coordination in that aspect. So.
You could still do it. It just takes will.
Yeah, I'm not even sure I've got two left feet.
It's true.
Yeah.
Well, 2 right feet will do just fine.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So we know that you have spoken at numerous conferences. I mean, you were here at STL Days of .NET this past November. Any future conferences or anything like that you're going to be speaking at?
At this point, I will probably be at the Iowa Code Camp, the Spring Iowa Code Camp in July. A little late for spring, but whatever.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I'll probably be there. I will be at that conference at the Wisconsin Dells in August. I expect I'll probably be back for St. Louis Day of .NET again in November, I would assume.
Yeah, I believe they're going to do it in November again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know that I have anything else. It's a kind of a light year with baby on the way.
Right.
But I'll be around.
Okay. Any other place that people can follow you other than at Dahlby K on Twitter? Any other place?
I'm pretty much Dahlby K anywhere on the Googles, on Twitter and Facebook, and everybody hates LinkedIn and GitHub. I spend a lot of time on GitHub. If you really want to get my attention, send me a pull request, or go contribute via Up for Grabs and tell me about it, because it's always exciting to hear about projects that have new contributors and whatnot. I don't know. I just enjoy connecting people.
Right.
Just real quick, tell us a little bit about LostTechies.com.
Los Techies. So Los Techies has been around for, oh gosh, it's probably close to 10 years now. 8-10 years. I've joined them probably 5 or 6 years ago. It's really just kind of a community of bloggers. We've had some folks come in and then and retire, but it's really just kind of a bunch of like-minded folks that are looking to kind of advance a professional agenda of being good at what we do, being passionate about what we do. The original sort of alt.net kind of stuff, there were a lot of bloggers from Los Techies that were involved in that, coming out of the Austin community. But yeah, I mean, it's really just a collection of developers, of guys and gals that are passionate about what we do, and blogging in general has kind of declined. And now that there's Twitter, and it's easier to tweet 140 characters of nonsense than to actually put together a blog post that nobody reads. But
Right.
we still have some content coming on there periodically. I might get out and blog one of these days. And then we also have an open space event, typically in the fall, October-ish. Not being in Austin, I tend not to involve myself in organizing that, but I certainly go to participate. Open spaces, for those who aren't aware, are really just kind of a conference where you decide the agenda. Once everybody arrives, we have kind of an opening session on Friday night. People propose their ideas. I'd like to talk about testing JavaScript applications. I'd like to talk about the distinction between automated and integration and unit type testing. I want to talk about Git workflows. I want to talk about something other than introduction to Git. I want to talk about open source. Take your pick. You propose an agenda. People vote for their sessions, arrange it into a schedule, and then you just kind of show up for a day. And the conference is what you make it. Very simple rules. The people that show up are the right people. It starts when when it ends is the right time. I forget the rest of them, but basically you're just trying to get a collection of people together to just kind of share your experiences, share your ideas. It's not prepared presentations so much as just people trying to learn from each other. It's my favorite event every year. And a lot of conferences, I'm pretty sure that conference is again going to have an open space track where they just have a room set aside for people to propose sessions and invite their peers to come and talk about whatever it is that strikes their fancy. That's not necessarily on an agenda, and that's a great way to have kind of spontaneous discoveries. Not to take anything away from pre-planned and practice sessions, but I don't know. I love the hallway conversations and the
Sounds like it's kind of a good way to discuss what's hot at the moment.
It is.
Might be popular right then and there.
Or a great way to discuss what's not hot and popular.
Exactly.
Because no one's going to propose sessions on, hey, how do I migrate my old VSS repository to Git? or my legacy source control in general. But if I say, hey, we have some legacy source control that we'd like to migrate away, if anyone's done it, please come share your tips, that kind of thing. That sort of stuff is perfect for an open space. It's not going to get a slot on this kind of, high profile conference, but there are lots of people, lots of expertise. Let's see if we can learn from it.
Yeah, that's one of the things about some of the higher profile conferences is they might be going for what's new and pretty and not what people are doing today, right? Yep. And there has to be a good mix of what you're doing today and what the future holds for tomorrow in order to be a great conference with content, right?
Yep. Well, and catching everyone else up to where you are. I mean, there are still folks that don't write tests. Still folks that don't believe in continuous integration. We shake our heads, but I went up against that kind of a crew and I lost.
Yep.
There's inertia for those sorts of things, and
I'm in the middle of teaching Agile right now, so I can completely understand. So yeah, totally, wholeheartedly understand that feeling. So Keith, we have a question that we ask all of our guests that come on, and yours is actually, as a betting person, what technology do you see booming in the next year?
What technology is booming in the next year? I think, so JavaScript having emerged as the platform of the future, and we've already seen this with CoffeeScript and with TypeScript and a variety of languages. But I think we're going to continue to see a boom in people trying to leverage JavaScript without actually writing JavaScript. JavaScript is a interesting language. It has some unique features. It also is lacking some rather fundamental features if you are wanting to structure your application without reading a book about JavaScript application patterns. And so I think to really want, if you really want to do JavaScript well, I think you really don't want to be doing JavaScript. I think you want to be using a language that will output it. JavaScript as the new assembly language, if you will. I don't know if it'll be TypeScript or CoffeeScript or something else, but I think we'll continue to see a push in people trying to avoid writing JavaScript, just because it's not what many of us would choose if we were given a choice.
No, I would completely agree with you. I think one of the worst parts of my development career was having to debug a 1267-line piece of JavaScript behind a ASP Classic page to make buttons turn on and off and other things, and it was just horrendous. It worked at the end of the day, but how do you find the one semicolon you missed, right?
Well, I mean, we could debate whether or not we should have semicolons unless they're required.
Yeah, and this was
single quotes and double quotes.
Yeah, this was far enough back to where I think it was about 2000, 2001, so there was no, .NET wasn't there, we didn't have editors, we were probably using Notepad, it was bad back then.
We have come such a long way. I was thinking, when I first started doing web development, it was back on, Mac OS 7, Mac OS 8, I was using BBEdit.
Oof. That was a long time ago.
Saving the site on floppy disks so I could take it over to the server, because they wouldn't give me access. They wouldn't let us actually set up a file share on this public-facing web server. Yeah, it was.
Not even FTP.
It was on a Mac. We were using a Mac as the server. The very first database application I wrote was using FileMaker Pro as the backend database.
Wow.
The actual database application was a nightly task that read from the FileMaker Pro database and generated an HTML file that was the next day's lunch calendar.
Oh, wow.
This was back when the web was unimportant enough that a school district of it was the Urbandale Community School District just outside Des Moines.
Mm-hmm.
They had 3 6th and 7th graders as their webmasters.
Oh, wow.
The website for the school district. They had elementary kids that we taught one summer that did their elementary school web pages. The expectations, of course, for schools have evolved a long way since then. But
yes,
it was a great learning experience for me. But man, those were some brave administrators letting us do what we did.
No, that's crazy. That's cool though. I mean, that's such
is.
great training for.
It was.
It really is. I'll quickly share a story. So my son was in robotics, and one of the kids who was 14 or 15, I think he was 14 at the time, rewrote a website just so well that I went, how can I hire you? Because even though it wasn't anything that I would normally use, I don't remember what language it was. It was something that I wasn't really, I don't think it was PHP. I think it was some offshoot of like Python or something. But it was done so well with the CSS templates and all that stuff. I'm like, you're doing better than professionals at 13 or 14. I couldn't even imagine what that child will be, in 15 years if he follows the normal growth pattern, of a developer, right? It's just unbelievable.
Well, it all depends what comes next. It all depends on your circle and your professional influences. If I'd taken a couple of different turns, then I might still be doing C and C++, working in the bowels of Windows. Who knows?
And you wouldn't be able to complain about C++ as you do.
Yeah, so very, very glad that I'm not doing that anymore.
Sweet. Well, Keith, we definitely do thank you for joining us tonight. And, I guess we're going to kind of move into some of our announcements. Gus, if you'd like to go ahead and talk about your announcements that you have on the show notes here.
Sure. We've got a couple of upcoming shows coming up. We have Don Falker coming up in a few weeks. We also have John Peterson coming up in 2. Kevin and I next week will be in Kansas City at the KCDC conference, the 15th through the 17th. We'll be doing some interviews there. So next Wednesday we will not have a show, and we're just going to hang out and relax there and try to get with quite a few developers and talk to people about not only the STLTechTalk piece, but the CodeCast piece. So hopefully we'll have some fun out there, and if you're there, come up and say hi to us. We'd be glad to talk to anybody.
Definitely. And also here in St. Louis at the Microsoft store at the St. Louis Galleria, we're having our Windows Phone meetup. The group is getting together on this Saturday, May the 10th at 11 a.m. till 1 p.m. So come on out to the Microsoft store at the St. Louis Galleria. Come out, say hi, and just talk Windows Phone, Windows 8.1, and get ready for the upcoming announcement by Microsoft about what Surface tablets they may be getting to release. Were they going to release a mini? They're going to come out with another one on top of that and have 4 total. Guess we'll find out on May the 20th. And also, STLTechTalk, JJ and Alejandro will be at the Microsoft store a lot next week because it's Small Business Week. It's nationwide Small Business Week, and there's going to be a lot of coverage, and they will actually be broadcasting the STLTechTalk podcast next Thursday live from the Microsoft store. So if you are a small business owner and you use Windows Microsoft products, you'll come on out and talk with them. They'll be out there, pretty much the majority of the week each day. So come on out, and there will be giveaways and all kinds of other good information.
Yeah, those will be definitely really cool events. I think you guys will have fun with that or they'll have fun with that while you and I will be having fun in Kansas City.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot. It's gonna be a busy week for all of us. That is definitely for sure.
Yeah, definitely, and we'll miss you down there, Keith, since you can't come this year. But I'm sure you'll be back down there next year.
Yeah, good reason, good excuse.
I will indeed. Sad to miss. It's a great event.
Yep. And Keith, I can't thank you enough for coming on and having a chat and kind of catching us up in some good and exciting ways to hit the open source community and help out. Because I think that developers that live and breathe development as you and I try to anyway. I think you do it better than I do, but are able to get out there and help with certain things and maybe learn something new, actually expand their horizon, and will make them better developers tomorrow. So, and make us actually want to develop with them, right?
Yeah, that's there's definitely a bit of that.
Yep. Well, anyway, thanks so much for coming on tonight, and we appreciate it very much, and I can't wait to see you at that conference.
Hey, you bet.
All right. Take care and good luck with your new edition.
Yeah,
All right.
thanks a lot, guys.
Yep.
So
you bet.
everybody, make sure to hit Keith up on Twitter at Dahlby, DAHLBYK, and I'm sure he'll be more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
Absolutely.
So, again, thank you very much, Keith, and that's it for tonight. Talk to you later, everybody.